Your someday starts today. It's time to explore and test the newest science, methods, and trends for creating a life you love with your host, Tanya MFK. Welcome to My Designed Life.
Hello, and welcome to My Design Life, where we discuss realistic ways to create your best life now and then test them to see what really works. I'm your host, Tanya MFK. Thank you for joining me today. Now, I am so excited for today's show. We are going to be meeting with communications and social psychology expert Guy Golan PhD, and we'll be diving into relationships, which over 70% of the world is in one. And we're going to find out what we're doing wrong, how to do it better, and how to do it when everyone is so busy in life. But first, I wanted to tell you all how really grateful I am to be here doing this show and sharing these ideas and tips with you. When I became a widow to cancer at age 25, I felt so lost. My identity was completely wrapped up in who we were as a couple that I had no idea who I was, let alone who I wanted to be. And at one point, I ended up at a grief support group, which unsurprisingly, everyone was pretty sad with really raw emotions. And then I started hearing that some of these people had lost loved ones 10 to 20 years ago. And I thought, this is not who I want to be in 20 years. And that experience pushed me to identify the life that I did want. And the truth is that 95% of the population falls into a life they settle for, not because they're trapped, because they never got specific and clear on exactly what they want their life to look like. Now, see, we never had that homework in school. No one teaches us to set time aside and design the life you want. People don't ask you at cocktail parties, so what is your plan for an ideal life these days? And for many of us, if we do find ourselves there, it's usually through trauma and tragedy. But if we can make these kinds of decisions in the midst of sorrow, how much more powerful and do we have to do this in the midst of times of joy? And this isn't a passive thing. This isn't something you hope and wish for. This is a little more than manifesting. There is work to be done. A vacation doesn't just happen. You have to decide it's happening, and then you plan it. So it's equal parts mindset and action. We must believe we deserve it, believe it can happen, believe that we get to choose. We must come to know that we have the power to create our circumstances rather than be a product of them. And this isn't all just woo-woo talk. There are real, methodical, proven ways to get this frame of mind, to get rid of old beliefs and function in a new reality. And then we get to take action. Too often we're trying to take action in a temporary shift. The morning after a hangover, while taking off the pair of jeans that won't zip anymore, after that fight. Then we try to willpower our way to push through our new agenda. And when that weekends out, we give in, further cementing our idea that this is just the way it is. We must work on the mindset and then create the action. And the action needs a real plan with dates, measures, tracking. It may not sound sexy, but it works. If we want to see things happen in reality, we must work with real things. So again, I am so thankful to be joining you wherever you are to bring you the power, the tools, and the plan to create a life that you are unapologetically ecstatic for, a life designed by you. So listen, if you're tired of living vicariously through the images on Instagram or your friend's latest vacation post on Facebook, you're in the right place. We are going to meet with experts, learn with different approaches, tips, hacks, and practices to switch that mindset and identity and identify what you really want in life to create a life you love. So how does that sound? Does that sound good for everybody out there listening? If you're watching this on one of the social media networks, tell us in the comments, that sounds good. And let's get ready to go. Because this stuff gets me excited, okay? Like I'm telling you, I do this with or without the cameras on. Like I love this stuff. Like I came from deep poverty, living in homeless shelters as a kid. And now I live a life I am in love with. And I know it's an option for everyone. And that pumps me up. That's what brings me here. So I'm going to step off my soapbox finally, and we're going to get on with our guest. His work has been published and cited over 4,000 times in academic journals and quoted by publications like the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, Bloomberg News, and Slate Magazine, to name a few. A university professor for over 15 years, his social scientific approach to things allows him to be an effective coach that has not only changed the lives of top performers across the globe, but also their partners. He himself is the other half of an even busier spouse and has learned firsthand how to navigate the waters of a strained relationship in the midst of success. And while he's in an extremely happy marriage, he will be the first one to tell you that Snow White and Cinderella lied to us. Love doesn't conquer all, and happily ever after doesn't just happen. So please welcome the founder of Married to Busy, executive life and married coach, Guy Golan.
Thank you, Tanya. What a great introduction. Thank you.
Hey, you've done great things. It was an easy thing to do.
All right.
So now you've told a great story of how your marriage survived your wife at one point being busy for, I think, 90 hours, which sounds like there was pretty much no room for you. And I think for many, this would be where people would already see a red flag. Like, clearly this won't work. They won't have time for me. I'm obviously not important. And I could just see this spiraling towards kind of the end of a relationship. Yet I've heard you say in some of your work that your spouse is not there to take care of all your needs, which I think flips us on our head of what we think. So can we dive into this myth and a little more of what it's about and what we should do with it?
Absolutely, Tanya. Great stuff. The first year of my marriage, my wife was going through a surgical internship at the University of Florida, where she worked 90 hours a week. Now, as a university professor who has 4-month vacations and long coffee breaks, I never knew that there were actually 90 hours in a week, right?
I was just going to say that. I didn't know there was even 90 in a week.
So for the first year of my marriage, she left home at 5 a.m. She came back at 11 p.m. That was the first year. But this kind of challenge is a product of modern day success. Ironically enough, we see more and more men and women who dedicate their lives to being super successful, and that can lead to a lot of problems outside of the workplace.
That's the downside of you can be all you can be, right? The sky's the limit, right?
Yeah, they sold us a lot of stories, right? So in modern society, in Western society, but we see this more and more in Asian societies these days, there is a very clear formula for being happy. Work your butt off and become rich and famous, and everything will be perfect.
Oh, right.
This formula does not work. The United States is one of the richest countries on earth. People here have, food, shelter, many things that most people in the world do not even have. And yet we have very high rates of people taking antidepressant medicine, dealing with anxiety and really feeling like they're not living their lives correctly. So this is where people like myself step in, and I help people both empower their own lives and empower their marriages.
So what happens then? So if we're all working towards this success, we're all really busy, we're all doing these things. When we're in that relationship and we're expecting for your, in your example, and what you work with is a lot of top performers and the spouses of top performers. So you have people who are feeling disenchanted, feeling like they're being ignored. They're second fiddle to this success or this busyness, whatever it is. Busyness doesn't necessarily have to be some level of success that some of us maybe picture that as, the top performing industry. You got a lot to do, and the marriage is starting to come second. I have a toddler and a job and all these things, and guess what? We're the last people to see each other, even though I work from home. So when that starts to happen, and we start to think well, this person's not giving me what I need, right? We start doubting the relationship. Where are we going wrong with that thinking? Where should we be looking? And what is the truth of that as far as they're not really giving me what I need? And what do we do about it?
Well, let's deconstruct this salad just a little bit, okay? It all begins with a false assumption, and that is that marriage will solve everyone's problems in life, right? Let's think about why people get married in the first place. Most people, not everybody, will get married somewhere in their late 20s, somewhere in their 30s, because of typically one of two main reasons. And they're both as foolish as the other to get married. The first one is because you fell in love, right?
Ridiculous.
No, I'm going against common notion here, but there's a famous saying that I actually put into my book. I have a book coming out in a few months It's going to be called Married to Success. Look at me plugging it. I didn't even finish it.
Okay.
But there's a great quote that says that love is a temporary form of insanity that can only be cured by marriage.
All
Right?
right.
So, getting married, the person who you will marry will have more of an impact on your financial future, on your health, on your mental health, on who your children are going to be, on what kind of relationships you're going to have with your own family.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no decision that is more important in life than who to marry. And I see a lot of people, especially millennials, they will do tons and tons of research before deciding which mic to buy, before deciding if they want to go with the Beats or with the Apple earbuds, right? So they'll go and spend. But when it comes to the most important and fundamentally predictive decision of our lives, we make decisions based on two irrational things. One is the concept of romantic love, right? Which is a wonderful thing in the short term, but it doesn't help you in the long term. We can talk about that later. And the second one is very common as well. Well, I'm 30, I'm 35. I guess I need to marry. This guy looks pretty good.
Right? Love the one you're with, right? Like the old song.
Yeah.
This is where I am. I guess this is what I'm supposed to do now.
Exactly. And my sister has a wonderful thing. My sister appears in my book oftentimes with her quotes. And one of her quotes is, marriage is what happens a day after the wedding, right? So the marriage begins a day after the wedding. We're so focused on this notion of getting married. And think about the very basic ceremony of marriage. We dress up. We go into this ridiculous ceremony, right? Which many people spend, between $20,000 to $80,000 on. We become a princess in a white dress. We have all these bridesmaids. It's a fantasy world, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens? What are the expectations about marriage? What are we assuming? I think we're often, especially, you quoted the Disney movies, we're almost like taught to believe that when you meet the one, everything will be perfect in life. So everything starts with false assumptions. False assumption number one is that there is such a thing as the one. The only one you really need to know, as you mentioned, is yourself. Self-awareness is a key to success in marriage. But, having that notion of the one who will come and take care of all of my problems and all of my needs, that is a complete fantasy.
It's false. This is, yes. And I want to dive into this. We are going to talk about this. So we have a break right now, and we are going to be right back, guys. Stay tuned as we figure out what the answer is to this myth. Because if we think that the answer was marriage, it was happily ever after, they were going to fix everything, clearly we're wrong. So I'm hoping we have some answers when we come back. We'll see you soon.
Want to be a guest on our show? Do you have methods, tips, or hacks for living your best life? Got a topic you'd love for us to explore? Then we want to hear from you. Contact us at mydesignlife.show for further details.
All right. Hello. Okay, we are back. And you guys, as we're going through this, don't forget, if you have any comments, questions, put them down there, right? Comment in the book, comment on the book, the Facebook, and we'll have a call-in number for those of you who are outside a little later. So do that. We'll be checking it later. So, Guy, let's jump right back into this. So we had the bombshell, which I knew it was there. I heard you say it before. But I think this really throws a lot of people for a loop. Like, we think, like you said, this is the answer. It's and perhaps let's be honest. I think in this day and age, hopefully, there's a lot of us who have figured out that it's not the Cinderella, it's not the Snow White story. Some of us, okay, maybe not a lot, but we're getting there, right? They're going, okay, maybe it's a little me. But we do think that they're supposed to provide a certain part of this. They're the team. They're the other half of the team. And I know, and as you just said before the break, that's not their job. And I want to hear more about this. So it's not their job, which is hard to swallow. And so what is their job, or what's our job?
I love the term partnership. You mentioned it, right? A marriage is not about two people being constantly in love, right? I mean, that's great. I'm always seeking high level friendship over romantic love in a relationship. It's all about partnership. Two people who are highly driven, who have a lot of common values and common goals together, and who are going to dedicate their lives to help one another succeed. Now, I'm going to nerd out a little bit because I am a university professor.
Yes, yes.
There is a theory in international relations that predicts that two democracies will not go to war, right? So since World War II, we have not had any two democracies going to war against one another. The same applies to marriages. In a marriage, when you have two highly self aware and highly empowered individuals, the chances of divorce are very low. Typically, the cause of strife in a marriage is not only the lack of communication between the partners, but also the lack of communication within the individual about what he or she are really all about, what their values are, what their goals are, what they need, and the inability to communicate those to their partners. So you realize that your partner will not be able to satisfy all of your needs. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk over there because people are listening.
Yes. Well, and I want to say in that
yes.
real too is that the people take that as a sign that there's something that's the wrong relationship. You know, they see that and start to go, well, if they're not meeting all their needs, I probably made the wrong mistake. So anyway, go back. What is this asterisk, please?
Well, no. I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, there is an expectation in marriage. There is an exchange, right? I mean, if you really want to go back hundreds of years back, actually a century or two ago, the marriage was really about the male bringing in the food and the shelter and the security and the woman having the babies and all that. There was an exchange, right? But if you view your marriage in terms of give and take, tit for tat, a bank account, who withdrew and who deposited, your marriage is not going to do very well, right? Okay. The asterisk, as I was about to say, is there are certain needs that only your partner should take care of. And those are the needs for sexuality and intimacy. But all other needs pretty much cannot be expected to be fulfilled by one person, right? Wow. It's not the job of your partner.
So all that stuff, going to the grocery store together or going to the pottery class with you, them not going is not a sign that you're in a bad relationship. It's a sign that that's not their job to fulfill that expectation, right?
Well, it depends, right? It really depends. Regardless of the profession of the spouse, right? I deal with a lot of doctors and executives and lawyers, stuff like that. But even no matter what you do, there is an expectation that your husband or wife are somehow magically in tune with your inner thoughts, and they know exactly what you need at all times, and you're kind of like mad at them for not guessing. Right? It's something we see more and more.
They should know. I hear that a lot. Like, they should just know. Exactly. Like, they know me. They should just know. Like, I gave hints. Like, we need to just say it, right? Why don't we just? Well, and I love this because it goes right in line with the whole reason that we have this show and everything that we talk about and believe is that there is no action that will happen unless you know exactly what it is that you want. Unless you go, this is the thing, and can vocalize that thing. A lot of times the goals are something you need to vocalize to yourself, whatever that is, and work through it. But in a relationship, it's the same thing. If you have this idea of what a relationship's supposed to be, and you're just living that idea in your own little world over here thinking, Mr. Right or, whatever, Mrs. Right's going to just jump along and be like, cool, I totally get it. Let's do this. No wonder you're upset. No wonder it feels like you're in a crappy relationship, but you're kind of in your own world of a crappy relationship because this person doesn't even know what's going on, right? Like, so would it boil down to something as simple as lack of communication? Or
so Tanya, I do a lot of marriage interventions. Now, I'm not a marriage therapist. My approach, my strategy is very different. Okay. I don't sit in a room with both partners, but rather I coach both of them separately at the same time. So like I'll have, spouse number one on a Wednesday evening and spouse number two on a Tuesday, morning, right? Okay. And what I do with them is there are three things I find no matter what in every marriage intervention that I do. First of all, most people have no idea why it's not working. They think they have theories, but they're not really in tune with what the other side's actually thinking. Number two is most people do not know how to communicate, right? The key issues to themselves, to themselves.
Right.
And finally, the third one is to communicate effectively to the other person. So everything we're dealing with in marriage crisis can ultimately be pinned down to personal lack of self-awareness, to lack of effective communication strategies and tools, and oftentimes to lack of emotional intelligence. The great news is that every single one of those, and thanks to shows like your show, are tools that can be acquired very easily, right? With the right books, the right mentors, the right coaches, the right
Mhm.
interventions.
Okay. So if we're fostering communication, we're kind of, we've accepted that it's not their job to fix everything, to fulfill every need. We've identified that intimacy and sexuality is really like the core component of that relationship. Not that it needs to be the only thing, but the expectations outside of that aren't necessarily theirs. Where do we where do we get those? Where do we fulfill those other needs?
Well, hold on now. Let's go with the first one you just mentioned, sexuality and intimacy. Two very different things in a marriage. Now, you may say, yeah, everybody knows that these are really important things. But oftentimes, in working with so many clients, you see that sexuality becomes something that, from what used to be a daily sport or something very common in your life to something that kind of disappears and becomes further and further a part of your life, especially after children come into
Yeah.
right.
I'll
So
say that, guys. After children, it's like who's got time or energy anymore?
exactly right. So that's very common.
Yeah.
Number two is the loss of intimacy. We're not necessarily talking about the bedroom. We're talking about something as small as holding hands. How
Mhm.
often do you go to a party? How often do you find yourself in social situations where a husband and wife, some of them will hold hands the whole night, and the other ones will not even touch each other's fingers or pet each other on the shoulder, right? I mean, those matter. Those matter not because sexuality and intimacy are the core of their marriage, but rather they are the glue of the marriage.
Okay. So so I like this. So we're kind of it's there's no black or white one answer. It sounds like we need to shift the mindset that we have needs, to know what they are, to be able to discuss them, to have the conversation at some point. Probably, I'm assuming not accusatory either, like, well, you don't do this and you don't do that. It's really saying, I realize I need this. I realize I need that. And then have that conversation. So if we have been working with you, we're following on, we're like, okay, we've had this communication, we're doing this. You focus on kind of like busy people. So and the married to busy, which is part of your kind of where you came from, right? You're like, look, I am literally married to busy. So I'm busy. Like I'm that side of
Mm-hmm.
it. My husband's
Mm-hmm.
married to busy.
Mm-hmm.
So with as many schedules and lists and organizations and things that I have, like I'm a crazy organized person, it's still just like that time just still slips away. Like the priority becomes so low, and we're functioning and we're doing this, and I know the ideas of date nights and all those are great, and then the date night comes and you're like, can we just watch YouTube or something?
Mm-hmm.
How do we get past that hurdle? How do we get past the busy part? What do
Yeah.
we do? What should I do as the busy? I'm the busy.
Yeah. Well, before that, let's go back one step. Marriage is difficult for everybody. Busy, not busy,
Right,
successful,
right.
not as successful. Marriage is not doing well in Western society. We see as high as 30 or 40% divorce rates in some cities, right? New York City, where I used to live for many years. We also see something that nobody talks about, which is out of those who stay together, a lot of people are just staying there because of the
Mm.
kids.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh my gosh.
let's pause on that. Let's pause on that. Right? How
I
many
I
people?
have no, I was just say I have an aunt that stayed together with someone for like 38 years for the kids. And I don't think it did any good for the kids at all. Like that's the relationship they learned, was this like loveless, like not happy relationship. And then they went and modeled it on in their own lives.
Yeah, and this is something we see over and over. It's so common. I cannot even begin to tell you how common it is. It doesn't really have a name. When people turn from lovers and best friends into roommates who raise children together, right? So the challenge to marriage is they're busy or not. Now, I don't mean to offend anybody who's super busy and high achievers, high performers. These are people in my life. This is my wife. This are half my friends. And I'm also a very motivated person. But ultimately, it comes down to priorities and values.
Yeah.
Right? So it's absolutely legitimate for anybody out there to say, hey, honey, I'm really busy at work and there's this project I have to take care of. But in the long term, if you decide to place your success, your business, your job before your marriage, your children, your home life, there will be a price to pay.
Right.
And that price is very high. People look at the short-term gratification and don't consider the long-term consequences.
So what do we do? Like that's what we really want to focus on too. So we find ourselves there and we're going, okay, but this is really important. I really need to do this. And I totally love you. And I know it's easy to get caught up in the just one more thing, right? And that could be in for the evening, or that could be a project for the year, right? Just one more thing. And then here you are, you haven't done it. So what is the wake up call for us? What is the kind of thing that I need to do to go, okay, what does that mean? Is it just that fear of like, you might lose the person you love? I mean, is that where it is? And I want to say, just okay, we are going to be taking a commercial break in just a second. So think about that. And I definitely want to see if anyone has some questions out there or anything, comment, want to know anything from Guy, put it down there. Let's find out, because a lot of us are in relationships. And again, marriage, he was specifically saying marriage, but that's any really close relationship that we're in, guys. Something where you're in it. You're in it to live it, to stay it, to win it. If you got some questions, because I know I want to make mine work. I don't want to screw it up. So yeah. If you hold that in your brain there, Guy, and then we'll come back and we will, we're going to dive into that. All right, guys, welcome back to My Design Life. I'm your host, Tanya MFK, and I am interviewing Guy Golan as he teaches us what we got wrong about relationships, the mindset that we're stuck in, and how to get out of it. So before the break, we were discussing, where we are. How do we get past the busy? What do we do? Is it just that, I am the busy? So is it just the fear that I might lose my relationship that's going to snap me out of it? Or are there certain steps I can take to change my mindset, to make time? Guy.
So you asked me before about, running into the wall with our heads, right? What do we do to make sure that doesn't happen? How do you avoid the divorce discussion, separation discussion? And what I've found, Tanya, in working with a lot of different clients is something amazing. Most people, do you remember the movie The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Most people live in the Matrix. Most people have very, very low awareness about the relationship between how they live, their habits, their mindset, their worldview, and its consequences on themselves and on their marriage. So just like somebody who smokes cigarettes for a long time, who eats McDonald's every day, somebody who drinks every day, typically they will empower and excuse their bad behavior and their bad habits for a long period of time, until there's a heart attack, until there's an arrest,
right?
Until there's, right? We do the same in our marriages, right? We it's very easy to take your spouse for granted, especially if they're a great spouse, right? So if your partner is loving you and supporting you and
putting up with you
and enabling your lifestyle, because they have a role in this too. They're enabling your lifestyle. As long as that happens, there's no reason to change. So what is the solution? The solution will come from personal awareness. I often ask people when I start working with them, what score would you give your marriage from 1 to 10, with 10 being excellent, right? And most people have a much higher score in the beginning of the conversation than after my third or fourth session with them, right? It's very easy to sort of like ignore reality and to not take personal accountability for actions and beliefs. And there's something in social psych called optimistic bias, right? People always think that nothing bad will ever happen. But as we know from statistics, it really does happen, and quite often, right? So step number one in everything I do with my clients is personal awareness. Developing a true sense of who you are, what your core values are, what your priorities are, and really asking how aligned are those things with the life that you currently live.
Hmm. And how do we get to know what our values are? Like, do we just sit and kind of piece of paper? What are my values?
Mm-hmm. Did you get a coach? Now,
Right. Touche.
But really, it's very difficult, right? I mean,
Yeah.
introspection, looking in the mirror, is something very, very demanding. It requires a lot of honesty. It requires us all to become very vulnerable. It's very scary for a lot of people, right? So there are tools, there are processes you can follow, and there are very, very specific ways to increase your personal awareness about yourself, and in doing so, your awareness about the current state of your marriage.
Okay. So we have some steps, I think it sounds like, coming for us to figure out
And
kind of
there
how to
there are steps coming. Absolutely. Get ready for it.
how to figure out what it is. So what do you find is kind of so one of the myths that we explored already was that we think it's this happily ever after, love's going to conquer everything. And if we see any problems, then we assume that we made the wrong decision, right? Or that person is wrong. When in reality, we're learning that a lot of it's what we're expecting, and I actually heard that, a lot of times they say, if you're enlightened, or like, oh, communication is actually the breakdown to relationships. And I heard someone say, no, it's actually expectations. It's not even the communication, it's the expectations. And we set this area of expectations. This is what it needs to look like, and not even realizing where that comes from. Sometimes our understanding of what it's supposed to look like is from movies. It is the Snow White or the Cinderellas, or it's from our parents, good or bad, right? We could have had an amazing relationship as modeled to us. And when we don't see, that working out the same way in our own relationship, they're like, oh, something's wrong. Vice versa, it could have been a total horrible relationship, yelling and screaming and going, well, this must be how it's supposed to be. And so we model that, we do that. So so if that's one big myth that we see, that they're supposed to take care of everything, it should all be happy and hunky-dory, are there some other things that we've gotten wrong?
Well, let's touch on this. This is great stuff, Tanya. The number one predictor of your marriage success is who you're going to marry. So just like in the world of real estate, in real estate, we make the money when we buy the property, not when we sell it, right? Choosing correctly, making the right decision will predict our outcome. And when it comes to the mate selection process, the vast majority of people will make the wrong decision. And it's not just a guesstimation. There is a whole science behind the mate selection process. One of the things that I actually am about to develop as a coaching package, I haven't done this yet, but I think this is really needed, is actually coaching people on who to get married to. So single people, professional women in New York City, in LA, in the big cities around the world, who have a big career, and they're thinking, okay, I need to get married. Who should I marry? That decision, right, can totally spell disaster for the future, and it can totally spell success. People need the tool, people need guidance, and there is a whole science to the mate selection process. Hint, something you mentioned. We typically marry somebody who allows us to fulfill the dynamic of one of our parents, while in order for that, we need somebody who's just like the other parents. Not necessarily father, mother, but yeah.
No, and I love this, because the idea, it's so romanticized, really, is that we fall in love. That's the thing. It's love. And that definitely, I'm sure there's part of it, but it seems when you start to look at it and you look at the success rate of arranged marriages, that it's actually such a low part of the union there. And Ramit Sethi, he's someone that I follow more in business and stuff, but he often talks about how he sat down and like wrote out a plan. I mean, there's a whole plan. This is what I want. This is what she's going to look like. This is what I want to do. And then when he started dating his now wife, they sat down very unromantically and was like, when do you want to have kids? Do you want to have kids? What are we going to do? And I think especially for women, there is such an idea that if you were to come in with that kind of conversation, like they're going to run for the hills. Right. Well, and honestly, at that point, if they do, then there's your sign. But I think that concept is just so unsexy, so unromance love for people that they skip it, right? They just go, it should just feel right. And I mean, come on, there's so many things in life that just feel right. And then a day of drinking feels right. And then the next morning doesn't feel so good, right? So how are we making these marriage decisions the same way? So I love that you're thinking, and go do this. This is definitely needed, that to have some sort of guidance and maybe in the empowerment to say, yeah, you can do this methodically. You can actually think through this. You can be clear on the things you're looking for. Now, on the flip side of that, I want to say is I do know some people who have been holding out because they're so clear. I'm going to use my quotes here if you guys can't see me now, but so clear on the vision that they want that nobody else measures up. But what I've noticed is that this idea of it measuring up is really kind of this convoluted, like they didn't do everything just perfect for this Mr. Right? Like it wasn't even that person, there was anything wrong with that person. It was like this idea they have is skewed. And now they're continually single. Like what happens when we're on that side, the other side? We're so organized that we're like kicking everyone away.
Well, again, there is no Mr. Right.
Right.
Yeah. What we do have is everything you described. I love, right? The concept of the Indian arranged marriage. I'm a huge fan of that, as unsexy as it may seem. Now, I don't want my aunties or my parents to choose. I'm not going to recommend that your aunties or your parents will choose your spouse, but rather what I like about it is it really allows for a rational approach that puts personal awareness and personal responsibility at the core of the decision making, right? So no matter who you choose, they're not going to be perfect. But the big question is about alignment of values and alignment of goals.
Okay. So if we're going to get our relationships in order, those of us who are already in them, all right? So this is for the people. So if you are not in one, you guys need to get a hold of Guy because he's going to make sure that you can get into something that you're happy with because you chose the terms, right? Not because there's a magic spouse out there, but because you actually were self-aware to find the terms. So get a hold of Guy. Now, for the rest of us who are in relationships, we're realizing the myths that we're diving into. We're realizing that there's a different way. So it sounds like we need to do that work as well. We need to find out what it is that we really want. What are the needs that we're seeing? What are the goals that we have? And how again do we find out, like I heard you say this in another interview and you said, it's not about us having to do everything together. It's about us finding our own identity and growing ourselves. And in a lot of cases with your types of clients, our careers next to them. And I love that because the idea of individual identity, I think for some people seems like that's not what the marriage is. They're like, well, here I am just living my own life, being here, and we're just doing it together. And again, it's not the two ships passing in the night type thing, but even if it was healthy, I think there's something in our brains that thinks that's not the way it should be. What have you come across that where people are like, maybe already doing quite well? You're like, you guys are doing good. You have your own identity, you're living your life, but they're like, but it's not the way it should look. What would you say to those people?
I would tell them that my father has been married to my mother for over 63 years, and they're happily married, and they're a success story. And I once asked my father, Dad, what is the secret to great marriage? And Tanya, do you know what he told me?
I have no idea.
Having 2 televisions at home. That is a metaphor. It's so important for both people in the marriage to sustain their own identities, right? It's very easier, like in the movies, right? You marry somebody and think about for a woman marries somebody and she takes his last name. In a way, she's losing a sense of her identity in this ritual, right? But it
Right.
also happens when we're dealing with highly successful people. So nowadays, a lot of men are becoming the supporting spouse, and suddenly you're Mr. Doctor, right? My wife is a
Mhm.
doctor, so I become her husband, right? That's how I'm known. It's so a lot of men now are becoming stay-at-home dads, for example, and
Oh yeah.
that can lead to a lot of challenges in the marriage. So whether you are a woman who's married to a highly successful man, whether you're a man staying home, in both situations, the key to success is keeping a strong sense of personal and professional identity.
Okay. I love this because my husband is a stay-at-home dad. Like that's where he is. And I have definitely come through that old thought that we needed to be meshed into one and everything was the same. And my husband is very clear in his identity. Okay. Like he's
Mhm.
like, this is what I want to do. This is what I do. So if we can, we're going to take a break here and I want to dive in a little more. We're going to talk about me a little bit. I want to try to bring this on to where I'm at because you're going to have some steps and things for me to do and for those of you to follow. So we'll be right back, guys. Don't miss this. We're going to figure out how to do this relationship right. See you soon. All right, guys, welcome back to My Design Life. As you know, we are here with a Guy Golan, who is just a master at all things. He's teaching us how to talk, he's how to communicate, how to get our relationships in order, and how to fix them when they're not. So before we jump in, because there are some questions I have about where I'm at in my relationship, seeing what we can fix. But I also want to go ahead and check some of the comments that we have. We have some amazing things. Someone's looking forward to your book, guys. I can't wait till it comes out. Loving the new show. Thank you so much. People are just agreeing with you. They're going, amen. Intimacy is more than just sex. It's a connection on a deep level, which I think you've absolutely discussed there. And we have a lot of people just agreeing with us. You just can't get complacent and stay because it's too much work. It's too stressful and it can be difficult to leave. Right. So that's another part, right? You were saying like you just there until it becomes boring. And then you're like, all right, we've hit the wall. Now let's just talk divorce. Right. So I think the goal is to try not to get to that point so we can fix it beforehand. Right. So we're not miserable. Let's see. Someone asked if you can touch on the twin flame relationships and soulmates in the future. Is that
I
a
cannot.
space?
I cannot.
I cannot. Okay. And lastly, Sandra says, be the person you want to be with in a relationship. It's a basic law of attraction through self-actualization and honesty. If you're single, this manifestation will attract love. And I've actually heard you say something similar to that, where, a lot of times when we're pointing the finger going, well, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, there. Have we asked ourselves, am I being the person that they need? That meets their needs, that, or I guess that's not our job, but that, is that partnership with them. And I see that a lot. I've had my girlfriends, complaining like, oh my God, he's not this. I'm like, well, what are you doing? What are you? So, and I've heard you mention that too, right? So I absolutely, Sandra, Sandra, we ought to be the person that we want to be with as well. So, what I wanted to talk to you about, so you were talking about the identity, and it was tough for me because I think I still had that kind of mushy idea, that we'd be one and we like the same things, and that's, I don't know why or where exactly that came from, but somewhere it was in me that's what it would look like. And honestly, my first husband, he was amazing. He was, the Spanish, Latin, just, lovey-dovey, just, I was the queen, on all of those things. And it was lovely. And certainly we had our issues as well. But I had that, and relationships after that were very similar to that. And here comes my now husband, who really, like, was nothing on the list that I would have. And maybe that's something we could talk about. But there is something about his complete comfortability of, like I said, I'm going to bed. This is when I'm going to bed because this is when I want to go to bed. It doesn't matter if you want to stay up late. Like, this is what I need. This is what I'm doing. And he's unapologetic, not rude, but unapologetic. And he doesn't necessarily dote on me the way that some may see in a relationship, to be like, well, that's what love is. But it has helped me so much to stand in my own, to develop my own identity, to feel strong in who I am and not expect that need to be fulfilled by him. But I would have had no idea that that's what I needed. I would have thought that that model before was what it was supposed to be. And I'm so thankful that I have my wonderfully grumpy husband who doesn't pull it with me. If he's not going to tell me I look nice if I don't look nice. And that may be hard for some women, to be like, well, that's not okay. But for me, it's been great because I know when he does open his mouth and say it, he really means it. And that for me was something I needed. I didn't need any more of the smushy, lovey stuff as much. But how do we know, I guess, what we don't know?
A lot of personal deep work, Tanya. So
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned that your first husband, then a couple of boyfriends, then the current husband is totally different. And I'll bet you, we're not going to do it today, but I bet you if I was to sit down with you, I could directly show you how your current husband has a lot of similarities to all the previous men in your life, even if you're saying right now, Guy, nothing alike. The mate selection process is not a random process. It's not about butterflies and rainbows and magic something in the air. It's really about pre-programming of what we saw in our own homes from our parents, right? And kind of the psychological archetypes we're familiar with and we're attracted to. So yeah, personal awareness, number one to everything.
All right, guys. So that's the work I think that's cut out for us. So before my last question, which is going to take some time anyway,
Yes.
Please tell everyone where they can find you, what you have going on, all the details of all your goodies.
Well, my goodies are simple. I am the host of the Married to Busy podcast, marriedtobusy.com. Everything Married to Busy, right? People can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook, Golan Coaching. My Instagram handle is Life Coach for MD, for medical doctors. So Life Coach for medical doctors. I work a lot with doctors, but I work with a lot of people outside of that. And what am I doing? What am I offering? I offer people one-on-one coaching. I sometimes do group coaching. And sometimes for
is that like a group of like wives or spouses, and you'll come in and
every group coaching package is different. Sometimes I'll do one only for medical doctors.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do one only for medical doctors who are married or single. Sometimes I'll do one only for lawyers. Sometimes I'll do one only for people who are about to get divorced. So I do it based on just needs and clients, and when people knock on my door and ask me for help. But and pretty soon there's gonna be a coaching package for people who are single, are professional, have big careers, and thinking of getting married and want to do it the right way.
All right. Well, just one moment. We do have a caller, so let's go in and take our caller. All right. Hello. You're on My Design Live. This is Tanya.
Hi, Tanya. Tim Ray. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Listen, I just want to say I've been listening to your first show, and it's just off the hook. You couldn't have picked a better guest in Guy, and you're just doing a wonderful job. I do have a question for Guy, if I could ask.
All right.
So
away.
Guy, so if we kind of marry our moms and our dads, right? The typical archetypes that we are familiar with, sort of through our subconscious program at a young age. So if we're inevitably going to find that, even if we become conscious of it, is it a good thing, or is it a bad thing? If you find that, now you're more likely to know what issues to work on when you find somebody of your past, because this is going to be in your face. Or do you become conscious on your own and then do the opposite? Is there any formula you've seen when it comes to people marrying their parents?
Tim, it's a great question, and the answer is simple. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing because a decision is not based on personal awareness and a choice, but rather it's based on subconscious elements, which we're typically are attracted to the parent that has wounded us emotionally, subconsciously, and we're trying to fix the childhood wounds through the marriage. It's, remember, the subconscious does not have a memory of time. So we are all 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, 20-year-olds, in my case, 47-year-olds, simultaneously.
Wow.
Thank you. Great job, guys. Thanks.
All right, Tim. Thanks for calling in. Wow, that was strong right there, guys. I love that. I love that delineation because you did say we're all kind of gravitated towards that, but is it a good thing or a bad thing? So, and the fact that we gravitate towards the negative one usually is because we're trying to find something we didn't get before, right? That thing we're still longing for, that 2-year-old, like you said. Well, so as we start to wrap up here, we want to test out how to make a better relationship. And so please tell me, what are you going to have me do for the next 2 weeks to try to not be so busy and to make my relationship a priority?
So Tanya, I love this question. I prepared something. I do this with my clients, but it's now on my website. So anybody who goes to married.com, they'll see a pop-up. You can download 10 tips on how to get your unmet needs fulfilled in a marriage, right? So marriedtobusy.com. So this is not only for you, it's for your husband also. Okay. I'm going to take you through the process.
Okay.
And it really starts the first 3 or 4. I always ask my clients to sit down and really think about it and make a list of the top 10 needs that you have in your life to be happy. Not in the marriage, but in life.
Okay.
Right? So I need
top 10 needs in life. I'm going to make a list.
Life, right? So I need somebody. So I need companionship. I need somebody to go to yoga class with. I need somebody who will listen to my problems. I need somebody who will give me physical or emotional attention, and those kind of things. So you make a list. Second point is differentiate between your wants, the things you want, you think you need, and your musts. Right? Tony Robbins talks about the distinct wants and musts. I want to go to Brazil this year, but what must I have in my life to be there, right? So really making a list, prioritizing the list, look at what are the top 3 most important things. And then when you have those top 3, you go to your husband and you communicate those top 3. And you say, honey, or your wife, you say, honey, I realize that you cannot fulfill all of my needs. Here are the 3 most important things. And yes, you can put sexuality and intimacy as number 1 if that's the one for you.
Whatever's your thing.
But it's not only about telling them what you need. You also need to tell them why you need it, why it's important to you. I need it because when I don't get this fulfilled, I feel a certain way. And when I feel a certain way, it makes me feel insecure in the marriage, or it makes me feel like you don't love me, or it makes me feel like we don't have the right priorities or the same priorities. Right? So that is the first step, Tanya.
Okay, my goodness. All right. So we are running out of time. Thank you so much. You guys, I am going to be documenting these steps on social media. So see how these conversations go, how it all is. Guy, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure you guys don't, go to marriedtobusy.com, get your 10 tips. We can do it together. Follow me at Tanya MFK. Guy, we'll see you soon. Thank you again so much. And
thank you, Tanya.
Yes. And you guys, we have our assignment this week. So make sure to follow me again on Facebook and Instagram. If you liked what you saw, then don't miss a thing by subscribing to one of our channels, or better yet, subscribe to our email list and get show updates, highlights, giveaways, and more. We'll be here every other Monday at 3 p.m. That's all for now. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you for joining us at My Design Life. Catch us every other Monday at 3 p.m. EST. Follow us at Tanya MFK, My Design Life Show, United Intentions Foundation, UI Media Network, and UI Media Network 111. Do you have methods, tips, or hacks to live your best life? Be a guest on our show. Contact us at mydesignlife.show to submit an application.